everyone, and welcome to My Brain is a Wonderland, the podcast for neurodivergent women and the people who love them. Today you are here with your host, me, Emily, and today is unscheduled interrupting programming. Is that how they say it? I don't know. We're interrupting our programming today. I was in the process of completing, I've already recorded them, but I haven't edited them and put them all up, but doing the 4 Unmasking Autism episodes, which are based on the book by Dr. Devon Price, Unmasking Autism. If you haven't listened to those 2 episodes, the last 2 episodes, other than my film fixation episode, are based on, I believe, the psychological, maybe the behavioral female traits of females who have autism. And I was going to do the other 2 sections of traits. I think one of them is social. I'm not sure what the other one is. But I felt like I needed to interrupt this series I was doing with an episode that is going to be near and dear to my heart. And I think a lot of people out there listening, especially if you're of my age, in your 30s, 40s, even people in their 20s. But 2 days ago, I'm recording this on Monday, October 30th. 2 days ago, Matthew Perry died. That's Matthew Perry, Ms. Chanandler Bong from Friends. And you can probably hear in my voice that I'm a little bit emotional, which is why I felt the need to come record this episode. And I just want to tell people right off the bat, I'm trying not to cry. I want this to be a celebratory episode of all the things I love about Friends and all the things I love and loved about Matthew Perry. But you can hear my voice that all day yesterday on Sunday, I was close to tears. And I just want to unpack that a little bit, why it feels so impactful, why I'm having this emotional response, talk a little bit about hyperfixations, what these types of hyperfixations mean to people who are neurodivergent. If you hate Friends, this might not be the episode for you, but there'll be a lot of talk about grief and hyperfixations and passion. So, alright, I'm going to try to pull it together so I can talk about this episode. And honestly, yesterday on Sunday, I believe he died Saturday night or Saturday evening in California, and I live in Florida, so they're a few hours behind. But I woke up on Sunday and found out that he had died. And I was laying on the couch while my husband was playing a video game, and I let out an audible, like really loud, really genuine. I just really couldn't believe it. And I've only cried about one other celebrity death or been teary-eyed about it, and that was Amy Winehouse. She is a British singer. I'm going to talk a little bit about the connections because I think there is a reason I cried about her and Matthew Perry as well. But she famously also struggled with addiction, was an incredible talent, and ended up dying way too young because of her addictions as well. We don't know yet why Matthew died. Could have been a heart attack, could have been related to his addictions. But Amy Winehouse died because I believe she stopped drinking and then went back on alcohol. And if you go off of a substance and go back on it, it can be really detrimental to your health. That's the same thing that happened to the guy from Glee. I forget his name, last name like Monty, something like that. But anyway, I've basically seen this show. Not kidding. I wrote down when I took my notes, because I like to have notes for these episodes, maybe 30 to 50 times, which I'm in my mid to late 30s, so I'm thinking I would have had to have watched the entire series 2 to 3 times since I started watching it a year to hit like 50. So I don't think I've watched it 50 times all through, but probably around 30. And that doesn't include all of the separate episodes that I'll watch whenever I travel and go to a hotel. It is the first thing I put on in my hotel. It's in the background constantly, because if you have cable in a hotel, there's always a Friends episode playing. So I'll get up in the morning while I'm getting ready. I'll put it on. Just anytime, honestly, if anytime I'm in the hotel, unless I'm watching something else, sleeping, stumble upon something else that I'm really into, or there are no Friends episodes on, because that happens occasionally, that is what I'm watching. And I actually remember the day after it was released in the UK. I was 10 years old when it came out, and I remember, was I 10 years old? Wait, it came out in 1994. I'm not sure if it aired in the UK in 94 though, because of how TV was back then. It might have been 95. So I was probably 8 to 9 years old, depending on when it aired. And I remember being in elementary school, and this show had been advertised a lot. I mean, you don't know, back in the day, like this Barbenheimer advertising you see right now, this is how it was back in the day for a TV show. We were all waiting for the next launch of the next great American TV show. Like, is it Seinfeld coming out? I actually don't even know if Seinfeld was that big. When it came out, I have no idea because I didn't really watch it. But we were always looking for that next show that was on all of the channels being advertised. And it would be like, okay, next week, and for like a month or two. That's all you'd hear about. It was in all the magazines, and you were just waiting for this TV show. So we all knew Friends was coming out. And I remember the day after it came out, I hadn't actually seen it. My mom's not a big fan of American sitcoms, so she probably wouldn't have watched it herself, and she even now doesn't really like Friends. But my friend and classmate in elementary school, Hannah, she said that she had watched it and she thought it was kind of funny. And I don't know why I remember that interaction. I don't know why. I remember it so clearly that we were talking about Friends, and it's so interesting that I remember that. I must have been thinking about it, wanting to watch it. Maybe my mom didn't want to watch it. I was too young to be able to control the remote. I'm not sure. So Hannah Alley, thank you. You're the one who kind of got me on it a little bit. And I want to talk a little bit about why it was so impactful, this show. I think if you don't like Friends, what's wrong with you? That was a joke, but I mean, millions watch this show, and I know there's a lot of things wrong with it, but it was made for the common masses. It really was. It was made for everyone to love it, and it's why so many people did. In the UK, I would have said, the UK's small, everyone watched the same thing, it was just normal. But this was what everyone was watching around the world at the time. They watch in the show Baywatch, and I watched that before. I think Baywatch was one of the most highly syndicated TV shows before Friends. And without the internet, we all kind of tuned into these mass events, and Friends really became a mass event. And I know there's a lot of criticism around it, which I don't think is unfounded in some ways. And it's really funny when you age, how you kind of reflect on things. But, I would look back on old TV shows and movies that, from the 60s or 70s that were really a bit racist. Like they had maybe a minority character in it where you're like, oof, that is bleh. Or some of the things they might say about women or gay people or something like that. And you realize that it's just what it was. And I'll give you an example. Sex and the City. A lot of people look back on it now and say, God, what are these women talking about? This is so stupid. Like, they're so blah. But this was the first time ever that women discussed sex on TV like this. Ever. And I studied that show in media studies, and I had a male media studies teacher in around 2002, and he was really pushing this Sex and the City thing, saying, and I'd already been watching it, but saying, like, this is radical. This has never been done on TV. The fact that they're letting women talk about this is insane. And so I think Friends kind of got caught in that same bracket that, I mean, you're always in a transitional period. You're never reaching the peak of feminism, the peak of anti-racism, And Friends gets a lot of flack for mishandling trans people, mishandling making a lot of gay jokes, right? And so I think it was a reflection of the time, but also they included a lot of things that were either had never or were rarely, I can't really speak to were never, but almost never or very rarely on a network TV show made for so many people, right? You might have your niche, this, that, where they put something in, but not many people are watching this. So many people were watching this, and they were kind of a transitionary model. It was a sign of the times. They were in the 90s, which was really a time I wrote down in my notes of hope and change, and I was like, okay, Obama, that was like 10 to 15 years later, but it's true. Science was getting better, knowledge was getting better. We started using DNA in crime. I mean, in the 80s, you couldn't even find someone with DNA. We had like sloppy fingerprints. We were coming out of and still dealing with the AIDS epidemic, but also finding more information about it. People wanted more out of life. They didn't just want to work and die. They wanted to have friends, have a social life, have a work-life balance, love their jobs. I don't know if work-life balance was really discussed back then. That's another example I'm talking about now. If you made a Friends TV show, there'd be a lot about work-life balance. Back then, it was more about you want to find the job you love so that when you're working a lot, it doesn't feel like work. Clinton had become president the year before. He had kind of an interesting early reign before he was impeached that brought a lot of hope to people, great economy. And there were lots of differences and diversity becoming more acceptable, more discussed about. And I think they tried to incorporate that, but, have fallen at the wayside in our current reflection. No one goes from full racist, misogynist to like the epitome of DE&I. It's just not what you do. You have to move through these periods that, when you look back on it, seem like, really horrible. But I just wanted to note some of the moments real quick. And I'd just done these off the top of my head. I hadn't even watched anything because I literally cannot watch Friends right now. It's too sad. But some of these things that I think would not have been in most shows prior to this if it had been a real big network show that was going all out around the planet. The first one is Ross's wife leaves him for a woman. This is one of the major plot points of the first episode. First episode. She leaves him for a woman. She's a lesbian. That whole season rolls out their relationship, this lesbian relationship. The ex-wife ends up having Ross's baby while still being married to a lesbian, and all of the friends attend their wedding, their lesbian wedding. And I think to put that in the first episode even was very like, this is what we're doing and this is acceptable and we don't care what you think. And it probably seems like 1994 we were saying, being a lesbian is okay. But no one had really said that before, out there and treated it normally. I actually didn't look this up, but it's coming to me now. The first time two women kissed on a TV show in England was in the 90s, and I think it was after Friends. So this wasn't a common thing. This wasn't like, there were gay people just hanging out in TV shows. It was really not common and not okay to have it on a lot of shows. Unless maybe it was framed in like a negative way or a sad way, I'm not really sure. But to have it framed in this kind of, this is what she's doing, she's gay, deal with it, was just not done. There's a terrible trigger warning, molestation, child abuse. There's a terrible episode that they treat as funny because that's how it was treated back then. Chandler goes to Joey's tailor, and this tailor has been Joey's tailor since he was a child, and they both realize that the tailor is a pedophile, and he's molesting adult men too, so he's an abuser, a pedophile, he's been molesting male children and men his entire career. And that's really sad now looking back on, but it's kind of a joke in the show. Chandler's dad is an evolving kind of item. he is maybe presented as gay at first, that he would cheat on the mom with men, with the pool boy, with the assistant, whatever. Then we see he's kind of discussed as being in a drag show in Vegas. And then maybe they're kind of trying to field the trans idea, that maybe he's trans, but is she trans? I'm not sure. And it all gets really muddled because of how they present it, how they talk about it. His father, who I don't know if she becomes a woman. I don't know if she's in drag. She's played by a woman, so she has breasts. And when we finally see her, she has breasts. She has a deep voice. Like she maybe used to be a man. They use it as a point of funny. And so I think that would be uncomfortable for a lot of people, especially if you're trans or thinking about that stuff. But I think in the 90s, this was never talked about in mainstream stuff either. And all of the friends act like it's totally chill. Chandler's really the only one who's freaking out about it the whole time. Monica also has an alcoholic boyfriend that they have to address and kind of deal with that. And Chandler dates a woman in a polyamorous relationship. And both of these episodes, I think, are in season 1 or 2, the alcoholic and the polyamorous relationship. I mean, they were really pushing this kind of, you're in your 20s, it's the 90s, let's be, diverse and interesting. And yet, there is only one black person in the show. She comes up a lot later, I want to say season 8 or 9. And she is Ross's co-worker, who then she becomes Joey's girlfriend, and then Ross's girlfriend. There's also a cameo over a couple of episodes, maybe, with Gabrielle Union, and she ends up dating Joey and Ross as well. That's interesting. Wait, they're the only two who dated black women, and they both dated both of them? That's interesting how they did that. But there aren't enough black characters. There aren't enough minorities. I mean, in New York, where are the Hispanic people? It's just interesting that they did that, but that was very normal back then. And so I don't struggle with that because I grew up with that. I reflect on it, but it doesn't stop me laughing at certain things and enjoying it. And really, people criticizing it, it was an excellent show, especially early on. I would challenge anyone not to watch the first pilot episode and be just drawn in. The comedy, the acting, the writing, the situation is so relatable and well done that it's a struggle not to keep going with it. I kind of wonder why I became so obsessed with it, because I was very much into How I Met Your Mother, that came out in my, I want to say mid to late 20s, and I was their age when it came out, right? So I should have felt more connection to it, but I really didn't. And I think what that is about is maybe my age. I wrote something down that, when you're developing as a child, the stuff that you're developing with and growing with really sticks to you and really just sticks to your bones, sticks in you. When you see a tree and a vine is wrapped around that tree, or two trees are growing together and they've kind of carved their limbs into each other as they've tried to grow together, but they've still succeeded growing together. That's how I really feel about Friends and some other things from my childhood. That you're just forever intertwined. That you can't let go of this show that grew with you, that comforted you, that reminds you of a time that was simple. I mean, God, I feel like my grandparents or something. It was such a simpler time. But it's so true. And people kind of look on stuff like TV, especially Friends, as it's kind of shallow, that you enjoy it. But when you're neurodivergent and you struggle to make friends and you struggle to keep friends, but you can get this comfort and ease from watching your favorite show instead of having to go out with acquaintances, it's really something special. It's really something special. And Plato once said that art imitates the objects and events of real life, which to me is sometimes the best art of all. The type of art that reflects yourself, reflects where you're at in life, reflects who you want to be, and reflects who you want to be with. And I don't think that that's a sad thing to enjoy a show like this as much as I do, and as much as some other people do. I will be able to watch this for the rest of my life and enjoy it and be happy when I watch it. And it's interesting, I had she was maybe 70-year-old manager a few years ago, maybe 8 years ago actually, and I remember her talking about MASH, and how she remembered the end of MASH, and how MASH was everything to her. And I've heard similar things about MASH, the way it talked about the 70s and the Vietnam War, and that kind of thing. I don't think I've ever seen MASH. I think it's been on the background on a Sunday when I was a kid maybe, but I've never seen it. And that for her was her friends. That was her thing that clung to her bones, that raised her, that grew with her. And now I have such a different view on what she said, because I remember thinking, MASH, okay, whatever. Another thing I looked up was that when you binge watch your favorite TV show, of course you get a hit of dopamine to the point that it can feel a little bit like a high. So I think us neurodivergents who lack in dopamine, that can be a real constant for us, that it really links to that happy feeling and that comforted feeling. Can even feel like kind of a pseudo addiction, especially when you get into those, hyperfixation phases where you just watch a show repeatedly. I'm a little bit there with Frasier right now. Thankfully, I started rewatching Frasier right before I found out about Matthew Perry, so it doesn't have a relation with the emotion that I started watching Frasier because I didn't want to watch Friends. I was already watching it, but I'm watching Frasier a lot right now. Just trying to relive a bit of that comfort that I get from Friends a lot, but I also have gotten from Frasier. Frasier's another one of my repeats that I'll watch all the time. And I don't know if anyone here follows the Psych Dr. MD on IG or TikTok. She's actually a psychiatrist who lives with ADHD. I'm not sure what kind of ADHD she's probably said, but I don't follow too closely. But she posted a reel about Chanandler Bong, and she had said that she spent most of the day crying, and that part of that reason was that she said that Chanandler Bong brought her so much joy and was played by a man who struggled to find his joy. And I think that's where this connection with Amy Winehouse comes in. I have a lot of addiction issues in my family. People have died, killed themselves. It's been really bad. And it's kind of genetically in my makeup that it can be there. It's that personal connection, seeing what could happen to someone so talented, but also this hope that they can get out of it. You just never think the person's not going to get out of it, I guess. Like, you think, someone can, they'll just stop. They'll just stop. And this actually happened to my dad. He died of cirrhosis of the liver when he was 43 years old from drinking. And I've been told that he was laying in his hospital bed, literally on his deathbed, and was crying, saying, "I don't know why I can't stop. I don't know why I can't stop. Why can't I stop?" Even in the face of death, he couldn't stop drinking. He couldn't stop. And you just... I think I get it. It took me a long time to get it, because it felt like this huge abandonment. Like, why can't you stop? And sometimes they just can't stop. They just can't. And Matthew Perry talked about this. He was a huge advocate for all different types of programs and helping people get out of addiction. Hank Azaria, who he's famous for being in The Simpsons. He also played Phoebe's David in Friends. He released a live saying that Matthew Perry was a comedic genius and he helped him get sober. And I think you just think, they're gonna get through it. And I remember watching the Friends reunion and he didn't seem together. I remember but that could be from he's been like in a coma and stuff. He was slurring his words. He didn't seem to be all there. And I didn't really want to believe that he was back on stuff, but also thought maybe he was. And it just is never ending. It's never ending for these people. And it's never ending for their family. And if you're out there, you have a family member or friend going through this, maybe just check in and say, are you okay, or do you need anything? Don't approach the addiction, they're going to be defensive, but just check in with them, because you really can think someone is okay, and they're not. They're like on death's door. And I think that's where a lot of this emotion has come together in one weave of my dad's addiction and dying, my issues that I have around that, my love for Friends, and then my love for Chandler, and then how sad it is that this all happened. Like, whenever I watch this show now, I'm going to think about this, and this is my comfort love show, and now every time I watch it, I'm going to think about how he died so young. If he died 20 years from now, when I was in my late 50s, I'd be sad, but you'd be like, all right, late 70s. He had a good run, I think he was 54. 54. It's crazy. It's just crazy. I'm sorry if this is becoming like a full unpacking episode, but that's how I'm feeling right now. And I just wanted to end this episode on a kind of more positive note, I guess. I wanted to talk about the things I love about Matthew Perry and how he was in Friends. He was almost always touted as the funniest friend, and the friend you would most want to be friends with. His acting, the emotional weight he brought to the role, I don't even know what the show would be without him. I remember in the episode where he gets engaged to Monica, and he's supposed to be crying, but actually the actor is not crying, and I've always thought maybe it was the pills he was on, that he couldn't cry. But other than that, he always brought every other emotion in spades. The love, the generosity, the comfort, the gaiety, his physical comedy. I will remember some of the stuff he did for the rest of my life. He often contributed to the comedic writing. I remember watching a documentary probably around 2002 to 2003, and it aired right before the season premiere of whatever that season was. It was like to get you excited about it. And they showed him basically assisting the writers on set and the producers with making up new lines because the lines weren't working. That's one of the genius things about those shows where they have a laugh track, but actually someone is there laughing, is that you know right away if the joke works. You might be in your head writing and be like, that's hilarious. And you get it out there on the stage and you get kind of a, But when you get that belly laugh from those people, can you imagine? Can you imagine acting on stage and you're just like validated every single time to the point that your confidence must just like go through the roof and you are able to act at your best at all times? That's what I love about those shows. And finally, without Chandler, they would be no Joey. They were such a great interplay of two characters from two different sides of the track, as you might say. Culturally different. Chandler and Ross were always kind of similar, went to college together, were middle class. Chandler upper to middle, I think, based on his flashbacks. But Joey was, the street smarts, the practical knowledge, the actor, the heart, the friend to Chandler when he needed it. And I'll never really forget those two guys together. That was a special partnership. And I want you, if you are ready to watch a Friends episode, or when you are ready, I recommend watching the one with the blackout. It features Chandler heavily in a positive, fun way. And if you're ready for a big frickin' cry, I recommend watching the one where Mr. Heckles dies. And I'm tearing up just thinking about it. You will cry, for sure. And on this final note, I just want to leave you with a quote from the man himself, Matthew Perry. When he was, I believe, being interviewed for his latest memoir, he was asked, "What do you want to be remembered for?" And this is what he said.
How would you like to be remembered? I would like to be remembered as somebody who lived well, loved well, was a seeker, and his paramount thing is that he wants to help people. That's what I want.
And I'll see you next week for the next episode in our series Unmasking Autism for My Brain is a Wonderland, Season 2.